Welcome, everyone, to the Cope Center for Autism's webinar, Designing IEPs for Meaningful and Measurable Progress, Collaborating When Challenges Arise. We are joined today by Judy Weinstock from the law firm ParlesRekem and Connie Sproul, parent consultant for the Cope Center for Autism. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura McKenna. I'm the Director of Parent Education, Outreach for the Cope Center for Autism. The Cope Center for Autism was founded by pediatric neurologist Dr. Jennifer Cope to provide answers to many challenges faced by the autism community. With nearly 20 years of experience helping autism families, Dr. Cope knows those challenges well. She established the Cope Center for Autism in Ridgewood, New Jersey, with a mission of providing prompt medical evaluations, equipping families with knowledge and resources, and fostering an inclusive and accepting community. The Cope Center for Autism provides answers to many questions with a responsive medical team, knowledgeable parent consultants, and a welcoming after-school program. Some of the questions that we tackle at the Cope Center for Autism is, my children needs an autism evaluation without a long wait list. Can you help? Yes. Do you accept Medicaid insurance? Yes. My child needs ABA help. Can you recommend providers? Yes. We are equipped to answer as many questions as you possibly can think of about autism. Tonight, we're going to answer another question. How can I be the most effective advocate for my child at an IEP meeting? How can I build a positive and productive relationship with the school district that will benefit my child? I still remember my first IEP meeting 20 years ago. I sat at a big table with 5 or 6 teachers and administrators. They used terms I didn't understand, like related services and PLAF statements. They handed me a 40-page document. I felt like they were speaking a different language, and I didn't have the translator. Because I didn't understand the terminology, I was both passive and confrontational at the same time. Neither method was effective. Tonight's talk would have been a lifeline for me 20 years ago. I'm thrilled that we have 2 experts who can help families as they begin their IEP journey. So tonight's talk is Designing IEPs for Meaningful and Measurable Progress, Collaborating When Challenges Arise, by Judith Weinstock from ParlesRekem and Connie Sproul at the Cope Center for Autism. Judith Weinstock is, has been successfully advocating on the behalf of individuals for special needs, so they are provided with the services, programming, special instruction, intervention that they are entitled to under law. As an experienced attorney, Ms. Weinstock has practiced law for nearly 2 decades. She's a graduate of Rutgers School of Law, earning high honors, and was a judicial law clerk for the Honorable John J. Hughes, magistrate judge. As an educator herself, Ms. Weinstock has been a visiting clinical assistant professor of law at Rutgers. She has also worked at Fairleigh Dickinson University and at Pace University. Ms. Weinstock represents children and their families in the area of special education, early intervention, transition, bullying, adult services, residential placements, and guardianships. Connie Sproul is a parent consultant with us at the Cope Center for Autism. Connie Sproul is a dedicated advocate, educator, and leader in the autism and special needs community with close to 3 decades of professional and personal experience. Her own family has had several young people with autism, including her daughter. Those deeply personal experiences have fueled Connie's passion for advocacy, and she founded the Navigating Autism in New Jersey group, empowering families as they navigate the world of special education. Over the years, Connie's been a keynote speaker for hospitals, private schools, and major corporations. She's been a guest presenter for the National Council of Severe Autism, and now at the Cope Center for Autism, Connie provides expert help to families on a variety of topics, from ABA to IEPs. And now I'm passing it over to our experts who are going to, teach us all something new about IEPs.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully it'll be successful. Did it work? Was I able to share or no?
I don't know. I don't see it.
Okay, let's try this again. Sorry, we just did this and it worked. Okay.
I can share mine if you'd like.
Let's see. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Thank you very much, Laura. This is a pleasure. I'm very happy to be here. Connie and I have presented before, and I know Connie probably agrees with me. This is the one of the I really prefer presenting to parents to help them, to empower them so that they're able to be effective advocates on behalf of their children and to participate, to meaningfully participate in the programming that their child needs in order to ensure that they get the services and interventions that will address their challenges. So this is a pleasure, and I'm happy to do this with the COPE Center. So I want to talk about, we have different titles for these presentations. I think they all relate to basically how do I become an effective advocate on behalf of my child? And the purpose of that is so that you can get a meaningful and that your IEP is designed so that it can allow for meaningful and measurable progress on the behalf that your child can make. And also to give you a few tips on how to collaborate, because one of the things that I like to also elaborate on is that before you need an attorney, and hopefully you will never need an attorney, there are tricks to the trade, so to speak, of how to negotiate and try to work with your district in getting what your child needs in their IEP. And one of the first things that I always try to impart to parents or guardians is understanding your rights and becoming familiar with the law. I mean, you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to, go through stacks of statutes or whatever, but just to kind of in general know what your rights are and what the rights are of your children is pretty important. And it will help you advocate on their behalf. So I'm just going to go through hopefully a quick review for some of you, maybe it's new to some of you, of what these laws are. So we have the federal laws that grant rights to children with disabilities. One is called Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the other one is called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that's really, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, is really what we're going to focus on today or this evening, because that's how that's where IEPs come from. That's where the Individualized Education Program comes from. But I'm just going to mention Section 504 for a minute here. Section 504 is basically a civil rights law. It's an anti-discriminatory statute. It basically says that you have to allow access for anybody with a disability. And so you're talking about children, adults. It applies for students who are in kindergarten. It applies to students who are in college. So this is a law that is applicable even in adulthood. And the easiest examples I can give for it are, if you're in a wheelchair and that there's wheelchair access into a building. So it's not to discriminate against people with disabilities. It's to allow them to have access as everyone else does or any other person does. So another example that's more relevant to the school building is an example of if someone's hard of hearing, they get an accommodation that they sit in the front of the class so they can hear the teacher. And there's a litany of accommodations, they're called, that allow children that have disabilities to have access to their education. And Section 04 is relevant in those circumstances. Now, in addition, we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. And that's different. And the way it's different is that it is an act that ensures that children with disabilities are guaranteed interventions and related services to address their unique needs in order to make meaningful progress in their educational endeavors. So it's very different. It's not an accommodation, although accommodations can be included in an IEP. It is, in addition to accommodations, it's actually interventions and specialized learning or pedagogy to allow your student to make progress. ABA is an example of a pedagogy or a methodology in addressing your child's needs. And it's an intervention that would be required for a child with a disability such as autism in order for them to make progress. Now, in addition to the federal laws, the New Jersey has its own state law implementing special education rights. Now, all states have to implement the federal IDA, or else they won't get federal funding for their programming. So New Jersey does this, but they also have their own state law and their own state regulations. And they have some extra protections in there that even go beyond a little bit than what the IDEA does. The other source of the law is both state and federal case law. And these are just cases or controversies that have gone to court and where you get judicial interpretations of the law and the regulations and how it applies to real life circumstances. Now, when Congress wrote the IDEA, they also included a purpose section of what the primary purpose of the statute was. And I like to go over this because it reminds us what the law's purpose is. And if you have that in the back of your mind when you're at an IEP meeting, I find that it's helpful because if you bring it around, there's a lot of discussion that takes place. There's a lot of tangents. There's a lot of people in front of you, different teachers, different related service providers. And if you just come down to it, the purpose of the law is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education, or what we in the biz call FAPE, that emphasizes special education and related services that are designed to meet the unique needs of your child and prepare them for further education, employment, and or independent living. So this purpose just has everything that the law is about. We're talking about free, that education that's appropriate, that's provided by your school district. It's provided by special education related services, and it's specifically designed. The purpose of it is designed to meet the unique needs of your child and prepare them for whatever they're able to do after they make meaningful progress, further education, employment, independent living, or all of the above. So just to go over this again, in a more simplistic way or simple way, the IDEA's mandate entitles all children who meet the definition of a child with a disability to receive a free, appropriate public education, FAPE, in the least restrictive environment, LRE, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides. Now, who is a child with a disability under the IDEA? So a child is eligible for special education and related services if the student has one or more of the disabilities, and they're enumerated actually in the statute, in both the IDEA, the federal statute, and the New Jersey special education regulations. In addition to having one of those enumerated disabilities or more than one, the disability adversely affects your student's educational performance, and the student is in need of the special education and related services to address those challenges. And this is the list under the New Jersey regulations of the eligibility criteria or the list of disabilities that are characterized or make you eligible for a child with a disability for special education. And sometimes there's, a lot of times it's not really that important what is put into your IEP. It'll say in your IEP of what the criteria is. They're either other health impaired, there is autistic, there's traumatic brain injury, there's all these different areas. What's really more important are that the description of your child's disability is accurate, and that his levels or his current levels of performance are accurately relayed in the document, in the IEP. That's really the most important thing, and that there are specific educational interventions that are required to be implemented, and they're included in the IEP. So what is a free appropriate public education? So basically free without any cost to the parent, and that it meets the state's educational standards, and it complies with the child's individualized education program. So if you get an IEP and the district is not complying with what's in the IEP, if they're not providing you with, let's say, ABA intervention 3 times a week, or discrete trial instruction, then they're not providing FAPE. And when the district doesn't provide FAPE, that's grounds to file a due process petition. Basically, the districts are obligated to provide your child with a disability FAPE, a free appropriate public education. So it's very important that part of what this is that they are complying with what's in the IEP. The IEP is like a contract between you and the district. What's ever in that IEP is what they have promised, and they're obligated to provide you. If they fail to provide you those services, interventions, in that and teaching instruction that's specified in the IEP, they're in non-compliance of the IEP, and they have failed to provide free appropriate public education. The other thing that I'd like to talk about is what is appropriate. So sometimes parents, and we all want this, I'm a parent too, is we want the best for our child. We want the best education, the best methodology. And it's very interesting and very important to remember that the law actually doesn't provide what is best for the child. Best interest of the child is something that's in family law. In special education law, it is not what is best for the child. It is what is appropriate for the child in order for the student to make meaningful progress. And that's it's a key issue. And that's why it's really important when you're in an IEP meeting or when you're dealing with your district that you never say, well, this is what's best for my child, or I want what's best for my child. You should always use the word appropriate, that my child needs A, B, and C, because that is what is appropriate to address their needs in order for them to make meaningful progress. So the other in addition to what is appropriate, some of the other terminology that's very important to keep in mind when you're dealing with your school district at an IEP meeting is the least restrictive environment. Now, when the law, part of the genesis of the legislation for this was that the discrimination issue, which was that children with disabilities were being segregated from the general population. And there was a lot of attention to bringing in those children, to not separating them, to giving them access to all the other programming that the other students enjoyed. So the idea of least restrictive environment became a very important premise to the law. Now, the caveat to that, and what's really important to keep in mind, is that it's not just least restrictive environment in a vacuum, right? The least restrictive environment would be a gen ed classroom in a public school. But that might not be able to address your child's needs. Maybe your child needs more than that. Maybe your child needs, okay, they're able to access the general education, but they need special education support in order to make meaningful progress. So that's really the key second part of this. So what is the least restrictive environment in order for your child to make meaningful progress? And there's a little chart here that shows sort of the flow of from least restrictive to most restrictive. So can start out with your local public school. You can get special supports, in-class resource, pull out. Then there's special classrooms with some inclusion. And then there's out of district placements, a private school. There's sometimes you need residential programs, hospital programs, and the most restrictive is home instruction. We really, the law does not look favorably on home instruction, nor do judges. So once this is a little, you got a little background of what the law is and your rights. There's a cycle of how the delivery system works. So the first step is identification. And most of you are here, your child has already been identified, but it's very important to remember that the school district is obligated to find, it's called a child find obligation, another little terminology to know, child find. The school district is obligated to identify your child if they have a disability and they're struggling in school and what they would need in order to address it. So they have to identify your child and refer them to the child study team for evaluations, which is step 2. So once your child's identified, and I should mention that the school district is obligated to identify your child, but if they don't, the parent can or guardian can refer the child to the child study team, or the teacher or someone else in the school can refer them to the child study team for evaluations. If the district neglects to identify your child and they were aware of your child's challenges, then that is a cause of action as well, because they have not complied with their child find obligation. Putting that aside, you have step 2, where after the identification, you have the evaluation process. Then after that is the eligibility determination. There's a typo, I apologize. Then there's the development of the IEP, the implementation of the IEP, monitoring of the implementation of the IEP, and whether your child's making meaningful progress and whether the district is actually providing the services and interventions that are included in the IEP. And then every year there's an annual review to look forward to the following year of what needs to be changed. Your child, they may have achieved their goals and objectives, so they're taken out. And maybe there's new struggles or new challenges that are recognized and the goals and objectives are put in. Every 3 years is a mandatory reevaluation unless the parent waives it. You can request evaluations to be conducted earlier than 3 years, and they should comply. And the other thing is, if the district might want to do an evaluation before the 3 years is up, because they find that your child is not making meaningful progress, or they find that their challenges are not being addressed with the current IEP, and they want to do further investigation and evaluation. So I think I went through most of this, but so the school's required to evaluate students in all areas of suspected weakness. They're completed at no cost to the parent. You must provide written consent for the evaluations. And after you give consent for the initial evaluation, the IEP must be completed within 90 calendar days of that consent. So there should be, between the consent to evaluate, starting from the consent to evaluate to the 90 days, there'll be evaluations conducted, a determination of eligibility, and then if they're eligible, a development and implementation of an IEP. Typically, the initial evaluations usually include educational, psychological. Educational is basically the academic achievement of your child. The psychological is their ability. And then there's speech and language and social evaluations. And in addition to that, the child, what's very important is that the child needs to be evaluated in all areas of suspected disability. So it might include all the ones that I just mentioned, in addition to some others. You can request the additional evaluations. Sometimes there's a neurological, there's an occupational assessment that can be done, and also physical therapy assessment that can be done. Now, Connie, I think we'll go into this a little later, but there are independent evaluations that you can request at the district's expense. Okay. If you are not satisfied, or you think that the evaluations didn't address what you were concerned about, you can request that the district conduct or pay an independent evaluator to come in and assess your child. In addition to that, parents can pay for their own evaluations, which, if they're at the point where they're so frustrated with the district that they come to us, we usually advise them to do. I think Connie also would agree with me that, having your own private evaluations done is advantageous for your advocacy efforts in getting what your child needs from the district.
Absolutely.
If they're independent, if they're private evaluations that you hire someone to do, that they're, independent, that they're not swayed by the district, and you also have access to those evaluations early, the results of those evaluations come to you first, and then you decide whether you want to submit them to the district. The district must consider those evaluations. They don't have to take all the recommendations. They don't have to implement all the recommendations if they don't agree, but they have to consider them, and they have to provide the reasons why they are or are not incorporating the recommendations into the IEP. So if the child is classified, the evaluations will drive the IEP goals and objectives. What are the students' needs, the areas of needs, and it'll provide the baseline data. Once the evaluations are completed, a meeting is held to review the data with the parents and to determine eligibility. Usually you should receive, according to the law, at least 10 days before the eligibility meeting, the evaluation reports. This is a big complaint from parents that they don't get the reports 10 days before the meeting. Sometimes they don't even get the reports until the day of the meeting. So these are procedural violations. They do have an impact, but in order to bring a cause of action or file a due process petition, you have to show that the procedural violation impacted something substantively, that it was also a substantive violation. So in order to be found eligible for special education and related services, your child must meet all the following criteria. They must have one of the disabilities enumerated in the statute that we discussed a couple of slides ago. The child has access to the general education curriculum, but is negatively impacted by the disability and can't access that curriculum. And the child must be in need of special education related services that will address that challenge. Generally, if found eligible, the team begins developing the IEP at the same meeting. The parent, if the parent wants to, they can wait to convene another meeting if they need time to process the information. But most of the time, you can do it in one shot. A meeting to develop the IEP must be held within 30 calendar days of the determination that a student is eligible, just so that you know that if you do decide to have it separately, that they have to do it within 30 days. Most of the time, I think that parents lean towards wanting to develop the IEP at the same meeting as the eligibility meeting. The development of the individualized education plan. So basically, the IEP is a roadmap to the child's education. So you're going to have present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. So in addition to the assessments that were done, the evaluations that were done, what usually is in the IEP, or what should be in the IEP, are teacher comments or related services provider comments. And it's like a narrative of how your child's doing and what have they achieved and how are they performing. And these are really important. And it's important to make sure that they're included, that everybody who is supposed to be including their narratives in there have included them. The next really important thing is aspect of the IEP are annual goals and short-term objectives. This sets so you have the present levels, which is basically where are you at? Where is the child at? What is the level of performance? What's their functioning? And then you have the measurable annual goals, which is where do we want them to be in a year, and the short-term objectives to get there. There's also, so we're going to go into that a little more later on, but there's also transitional goals and services, which start after the age of 14. There's placement determinations and statements regarding any deviation from the least restrictive environment. So there has to be there's a section where there's an explanation from the district of why the child's not in the gen ed program, why they decided, or why the child study team decided that it was better to have an inclusion class, and what the pros and cons were of inclusion versus a separate, a specialized classroom versus an out-of-district placement. They have to explain how they got to this least restrictive environment, why they believe that's where the child will make meaningful progress. It will also specifically include, or should include, the services, instruction, and intervention to achieve the goals, the measurable annual goals and short-term objectives. This is very, very important. It should be spelled out. And this is the contract that I was talking to you about. It's where the district is basically saying, we're going to provide these services. this instruction intervention to achieve these goals. And if they don't do that, then they're not in compliance with the IEP, and they're not in compliance with the IDEA, and they're not providing FAPE. If the district can't meet the child's needs, they need to, in other words, if they don't have the specialized instruction or the right type of methodology or the professional, they need to hire or train personnel or buy programs or send the child to another school. Lack of funding or scarce resources are not an excuse under the law. No matter what, they're obligated to provide the services that your child needs. And there's no rationale that can get them that relates to funding that would not obligate them to provide those services to your child. There's also the issue of extended school year to prevent regression over the summer, and which should be included if your child needs that. And of course, the related services, speech language services, OT, PT, transportation, those are all included in related services, and any accommodations or modifications to the general curriculum and extracurricular activities. By the way, if it's not written in the IEP, it's not happening. And also you can't enforce anything if it's a intervention that's not included in the IEP in the contract, you don't have any rights to enforce it, at least not through the IEP. Okay, who develops the IEP? This is a very important part of the law. You, the parent, are a very important team member. You are vital in developing the appropriate IEP for your child. You're also, there's the case manager, there's the gen ed teacher, there's at least one member of the child study team that evaluated the child. I prefer, and you can request, that all evaluators be present at least at the initial IEP meeting. You have other certified school personnel who might have referred your student for evaluations, and there's other specialists if needed. There might be some people that are invited by the school or you guys. You all have the right to bring someone in to attend the IEP meeting. Someone who has knowledge of your child and can help the team contribute to what type of program your child needs. So if you have someone like, a home BCBA, and you believe that home BCBA would be very helpful in developing a plan in school, bring them along. You should notify the district before the meeting to say that's who, that you're bringing your BCBA in, or your, whoever else you find can be helpful in contributing to the program. Every year, the IEP is reviewed to see if your child is making meaningful progress. It's looking at the services that were provided, the interventions that were provided, and whether your child has made progress towards the goals and objectives that are in the IEP. Every 3 years, there's a required reevaluation process where your child is evaluated again. However, if you feel that there's a need, a weakness, an area of challenge that hasn't been assessed, or needs further assessment, or needs additional assessment, you can request the child study team to conduct another evaluation. The child study team might want to do that anyway, even if maybe they notice something, or a teacher noticed something and wants to do a speech language assessment, even though your child doesn't have speech language services. They may find something in, working day to day with your child that needs further investigation. So if conditions warrant it, the parents or the teacher can request it, further evaluations or additional evaluations, but at least once every 3 years, the parents in the district, you agree to evaluate. It's required that they conduct more evaluations. It's called the 3-year reevaluation. Okay. There was one more thing I wanted to mention before I hand it over to Connie. If, talking about goals and objectives with the annual review, sometimes your child may have made so much progress that they've achieved their goal, and that goal will be taken out of the IEP. However, that doesn't mean that's the end of the IEP, because children evolve and they grow and they not only make progress, but in some areas they may be developing challenges with new material. So it's very important that the child be evaluated and assessed and that their current levels be reviewed to figure out if new goals and objectives have to be incorporated into the IEP. Okay, so Connie, I'm going to stop my share and you can take it over.
Perfect. Thank you, Judy. Pardon me as I skip up to the slide that I need here. Thank you all for taking the time tonight. I've seen some great questions come up in the chat. And even though Judy and I have done this presentation several times, I see some brand new questions. So it's amazing to see. I love it when parents get the knowledge they need and ask the questions and to become better advocates for their child. So evaluations, understanding your child's needs. Having a clear understanding of how your child learns, what makes them tick, where they're struggling is key for developing an appropriate IEP. Collaborating will be hard with your school if you're not quite sure what your child needs. Understanding their needs and obtaining evaluations is critical to be able to work effectively with your school. You also want to understand those evaluations, what they're saying, the scores can be confusing. Some are high, some are low, and then they say, "Oh, but we blend those. We don't need to pay attention to that one." It's important that you ask the questions and make sure that you have a full understanding of where your child is struggling. Once you know what your child's needs are, you can work together with your school district to find the appropriate level of services and supports. I've found in my own life with my own kiddo that there are sometimes when you're scratching your head and you just feel like I'm just missing something. I don't know what it is. That is where a comprehensive outside independent evaluation can really come in handy. It can answer questions you did not even think to ask. It can give you goals and objectives for the IEP that would not have otherwise been included. It can also give you a heads up for things that might be coming up down the road. There are differences, of course. Some independent evaluations, some districts will agree to pay for them. That can be a little bit tricky. If you can pay privately, then you know for sure what you're getting. The other thing to keep in mind is the child is not entitled to what the parent wants. They're entitled to what the professionals say is required in order to receive an appropriate education. And we will get a little bit more into that on collaborating and keeping the relationship productive and neutral, with still getting your child what they want, I will add. And again, services without understanding your child's deficits and strengths are at best a waste of time and worse, harmful. Again, more on understanding your child's abilities and disabilities. Where does your child excel? Where do her talents and abilities and interests lie? Focus on supporting their strengths and encouraging those strengths. Maybe it's art, maybe it's music, maybe they love reading. Try not to focus just on the things that need help. Building our children up in the areas where they are really good at things, that it is important and can certainly help with their self-esteem and teaching them to learn. Understand your child's diagnosis and disability. Autism New Jersey is a great resource for all things autism and all things IEP. The Cope Center for Autism, of course, is a great resource for all things autism. Attend lectures and workshops like this one that you're attending right now. Join my parent support group that I'm having over lunchtime on the 26th. I also offer an IEP clinic the first Wednesday of every month. I'm happy to meet with you, review the IEP, and answer your specific questions. Find local and national parent advocacy groups. There are many in New Jersey. They're all over Facebook. I'm sure you've seen them. There's a whole lot of groups that can be very helpful. Network with other parents in your community to find out more about local service providers. Goals and objectives in the IEP. Crafting appropriate measurable goals and objectives. This can seem tricky if you're not quite sure what to ask for. So again, the independent evaluations can help. Collaborating with, say, a private speech evaluation or an outside speech provider, having them write a progress note or even just the goals that they're working on outside of school can help the school district gain an understanding of where your child is and just to make sure that all those skills are transitioning and including those in the IEP. Goals should match the needs of the student as a result of the child's disability. The goal needs to make sense to the reader. Goals have to be related to the service, instruction, or intervention being provided. The goals can be academic, they can be behavioral. I love the idea that someone came up with using SMART criteria. What that means is the goal needs to be specific, needs to be measurable, needs to be attainable, relevant, and time bound. So, for example, specific, Johnny will read 10 sight words aloud by the end of October with 90% accuracy. And how he will do it, using what methodology. Are they going to be using Orton Gillingham? Are they going to be using sight words that are created by the special education teacher? And again, they need to be time bound by the end of the marking period. I oftentimes see in IEPs, Johnny will learn 10 sight words between now and the next IEP. Clearly, that's not enough. Let's challenge him. Let's get these goals moving. He should certainly be responsible for more than that. Again, the annual goal, how often and over what period of time? The method, how will we measure progress and who will collect the data? Is it are they taking the progress notes in, say, in an app? I know with Rethink, that's a popular program that school districts use. They will collect data through that. Sometimes the special education teacher will just be taking data with a pen and paper. And again, how often are they checking the data? How often are they collaborating and sharing the data? Ask for this data. You are entitled to get this data so that you know what your child is working on. This will also be helpful to share with any home providers. Lots of folks now have after school ABA. It'll be helpful to keep everyone on the same page. An example, a bad goal, Johnny will learn to sit in class. We need to know, how is he going to learn to sit in class? Are you just telling him to sit still? That won't work. We need to know specifically how this is going to be done. The better goal would be Johnny will remain seated during circle time for 15 minutes, 4 out of 5 consecutive trials, as charted by his teacher. Place, duration, collection of data by the teacher, and how often. That is a true goal. Monitoring progress. This is huge. Creating appropriate goals, getting an outside evaluation. If no one is monitoring the progress, it might all be for naught. So we want to make sure that we're holding them accountable for our kiddos to make meaningful and measurable progress. We want the data to be collected and analyzed to determine student progress and effectiveness in the IEP. We need to know the baseline data. Maybe Johnny already knows 10 sight words. Let's know exactly what those sight words are and let's build on those. Data must be collected throughout the year, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, and in some cases, daily. More monitoring progress. There are different ways to measure progress towards annual goals. There are curriculum-based measurements, such as iReady Diagnostic, and again, I mentioned Rethink earlier, ABC data for an autism program. This is very important. It's not an ABA program if they are not taking data and the BCBA is not reviewing how data is taken. Again, ask for the charts, ask for the data, ask for mastered programs they're working on. If they don't have charts and graphs, then they are probably not receiving ABA in the traditional sense, and it may not be beneficial for your child. Internal based assessments that teachers use. This is another way. Observations and checklists, homework, classwork, and tests. What are you seeing at home? Is homework harder this year than it was last? Do you see classwork coming home with different grades? Do you see them struggling in areas that you didn't notice before? A program put together by well-meaning people may not work, so it's important to keep on top of it. If progress is not being made, put your concerns in writing. This is as vital as the law that Judy was covering. If you do not put it in writing, it did not happen. They can ignore it. Put your concerns in writing. If your child is not making the expected progress, the program needs to be reevaluated. It can be a legal issue of a denial of FAPE. Your first step is to call a meeting and get the team to tweak and change the program. Creating a record, provide information and gather evidence. If you go in and say, my child is not progressing as he should, and say nothing else, you won't get anywhere. You need documentation specifically of where your child is not doing well. In other words, last year, math used to be really easy. He would get it done in a half an hour. Now we have 3 hours of tears just to get through one worksheet. You want to be specific. Getting to the yes, the art of negotiation, working with the school district collaboratively is challenging. And there's nothing more important than your child. And trying to keep your emotions in check it's challenging, and it's important that you do. And I'm going to give you some advice on how to rein yourself in as needed. A little praise goes a long way. Be respectful and reasonable. Do not reject program or services without considering them. If they offer you another classroom, go and see it. You want to be the workable, considerate parent. It doesn't mean you have to take the classroom, but go and look. Maybe it's appropriate, maybe it is not. Look at the peers in the classroom. Maybe that's why it's not appropriate. Always back up your requests with expert recommendations. Remember, it's easy to be dismissed as, oh, you're just the mom. You feel like he should be making more progress. But if you can go in with an outside evaluation from a speech language pathologist that says, he is doing all of these, he can do 10 WH questions every afternoon after school in his SLP sessions. He should be able to do them at school. Have her put that in writing. Your child's neurologist, psychologist, and behavioralist is recommending. Again, your home ABA program can be helpful for that. And I see this all the time. A long, angry email might make you feel better, but in the short run, it will not get you what you want. You don't want to be labeled a crazy parent. And again, being a parent and an aunt of two, I know how hard this is. Try to keep it professional, keep it to the point, keep your emotions out of it. They are all trying their best. They may not know what's going on. They may not know what you know. For every communication with your child's school, you should be able to answer this question. Does this advance my goal? It should be answered with a yes. Too many long emails are white noise. So again, shorten the emails, stick to the point, stick to your concerns and facts. Inform the school when your child is experiencing problems, meltdowns at home, problems with friends, not sleeping well. Maybe dad's away on a business trip and it's thrown your child's behavior off. Let them know, because they can't help and collaborate with you unless they know that there are problems that exist. Make it a record. Again, put everything in writing. If you have a verbal conversation about what your child needs, you'll want to follow up in an email. In a phone call, put the date. It's February 9th. I spoke with the social worker. Here's what we discussed. Here's what we agreed upon. Make sure you send that in an email. Create a record, create a notebook so that you can go back to these things and make sure that they're implemented if something goes wrong in the future. Communicate with the school in writing, especially those that manifest in the home. Again, homework is challenging. 3 hours of tears to do one worksheet is dreadful. Behaviors at home. Anything that might be going on, it is important to communicate with the school to let them know. And always be reasonable. Again, they do want to help your child. Keep that in mind, and it's a matter of you getting your evidence to be able to support what your child needs. Don't let them create a record of unreasonableness. It is definitely an art of negotiation. And this is similar to the other slide. Don't reject programs or services without considering them. Keep your eye on the prize. And the long emails, try to shorten them. And I can certainly help you with that. If you have an email that you want to send, I'm happy to take a look and make sure that we're not going into crazy mom land. Building Building partnerships. Respect and cooperation goes a long way. Establish a positive working relationship with the professionals at your child's school. Encourage mutual respect. Develop honest, clear, and open communication with your children's teachers. Maintain a positive attitude. Include school personnel in decision making and planning. Sorry, missed that one. Working with your child's teacher. It's important that the teacher knows that they can communicate with you. It's also great if you can write to the teacher and say, "Hey, how did Johnny do this week? He came home, he was upset. I'm not sure why. How is Johnny doing in the classroom? Where's he falling in the pack? Is he kind of in the middle of the pack academically? Do you see him struggling? Where do you see that he perhaps could use some more support?" It'll be valuable to hear what the teacher has to say outside of the formal IEP meetings. And again, you don't have to wait once a year for the IEP meeting. You can contact the school and the teacher really at any time you want to see how your child is doing. Again, with monitoring and making sure the IEP is on point. Understand your child's needs, know your rights, understand the system and the personalities. Keep records. Everything must be in writing. If it's not in writing, it never happened. We can't say that enough. Believe in yourself and your ability to successfully advocate for your child. Don't let the school's experts convince you that you are wrong in assessing your child's needs. You know your child, trust your gut. The other suggestion that I have is try to get in the classroom. You don't have to volunteer to be class mom, but go in to serve pizza. Go in to help out with the Thanksgiving party, whatever it may be. Getting eyes on the classroom, watching your child socialize within his peer group will be helpful to know where he is and may even provide some comfort. Maybe there's no need to worry, but it will certainly give you an idea of who the players are and who your child's friends are. Final words. Never under any circumstances tell the school you just want what is best for your child. In the world of special education, this sentence will slam doors in your efforts to receive services for your child. No one gets what is best. You get what is individualized and appropriate. So that's the language that you want to use. Try to maintain a pleasant and cooperative and respectful manner. Kindness and respect can go a long way in getting what you want for your child. When you get to the point in those IEP meetings, I know some can be very long. It's okay to say, look, we're not going to decide this today. Let's wrap up. Let's meet again. You can absolutely do that. You are a member of the team. There's no reason you can't have a little self-preservation along the way. So just keep that in mind. You're a valuable member of the team. And a very special thanks to our guest, Judy Weinstock, who is amazing, and a special thanks to Laura for putting this all together tonight. And I'm going to pass it back over to Laura. I believe we have some great questions coming in.
Wow, thank you so much, Judy and Connie. I learned a ton tonight, and I'm like an old pro mom, but I still, I learned a lot from you guys. I actually have a few questions myself. So a frequently asked question from parents who come into the Cope Center is, yes, my child has autism. You just diagnosed him here today, but the school doesn't think that he should or she should have an IEP because he's on grade level for the academics. And, little Johnny can do calculus, but has got poor executive function skills, poor behavior problems. The parent thinks the child needs help, but the school's saying, he's getting A's. What will we say?
Yeah, so this is very common. There has to be an understanding of the difference between educational services and achievement and academic. So academic is a portion, it's a part of the educational program. It's not in and of itself, that's not all there is. The laws are very clear on this. Education encompasses all areas of learning, social emotional learning, behavior learning, all of it is under the umbrella of education. So if your child has executive functioning deficits, or ADHD, but they're getting A's in calculus, that doesn't mean that they don't need an IEP. That doesn't mean that the IDEA doesn't cover them. The IDEA certainly covers them if they have a disability that is impeding some sort of access to education. And again, education is the broad umbrella. Academics is a component of that education.
Perfect, perfect. So I love your talk. You're talking about measurable and meaningful progress, or meaningful and measurable. I forget what order you guys put them in. And I think Connie really nailed it with talking about how one creates measurable goals. But meaningful is kind of a subjective term, isn't it? What does it mean to have a meaningful goal? Now, the Supreme Court, I know, ruled in the Andrew case in 2017 that it has to be more than de minimis. It can't be just a little bit of progress. It has to be meaningful, but that's still a subjective term. For me, make my child making meaningful progress will mean that he can master algebra. And for the teacher, it might be for meaningful might be that he can, add.
So I think meaningful can also mean useful. Um,
It's also commensurate with their ability. So meaningful means meaningful progress commensurate with their ability. And it is subjective. And usually if it goes, to trial or litigation, or if you're in some kind of legal forum, you're going to have to demonstrate what meaningful progress is, but it's particular to your child and what they're able to do. So some students might be able to do, calculus, and some might say, well, it'll take them longer, or, it'll be commensurate with their ability. And the progress, like you said, according to the Supreme Court, it's sort of this amorphous, it has to be more than de minimis. So it's largely dependent, it is somewhat subjective, but you can always use the terminology commensurate with their ability. And then you compare the assessment scores. And that's why the psychological evaluation is just as important as the educational achievement evaluation.
Great. And I loved your chart that you guys made about the different steps and going from a typical classroom to, you know, self-contained and then a private school. And I remember, there was a question that came up about private schools. And in some ways, private schools is something that's unique to New Jersey because we do have a well-established set of private schools for children with disabilities. What is the trigger? At what point do we decide that our students should has to leave the public school system and we should start investigating the options in a private school program? Is that a legal issue, or is that more of a something for educational expert to weigh in on that?
I
I mean,
could
I
say,
just want to clarify that it's not all private schools, that these are specialized schools, and many are approved by the New Jersey Department of Education, and
Yeah.
some are not. But they're specialized schools. It's not any private school. It has to be a private school that has special education in mind, and they have certified teachers that can actually address the child's needs. And some schools, although not approved, are specialized schools, and there are ways of getting those placements as well, but it's easier to get an approved school placement. But the determining factor is, I think I had mentioned at the beginning, is your child, it's to demonstrate that your child needs specific interventions or specific instruction in order for them to make the meaningful progress commensurate with their ability, right? And if you're showing that the program that they have is not that program, you can demonstrate that. And in
Yeah.
fact, maybe your child has been in that program for a year and has failed to make any progress, let's say, then that's pretty determinant. Now, the next step is not necessarily going to an out-of-district school. The next step is meeting with the IEP team and saying, okay, what can we do? Look, most parents, I think, at least the parents that I work with, they don't really want to take their kid out of the public school. They want to keep they've either moved to this district because it has a good public school, or, they want their kid to stay with their friends or their neighbors that they become friends with. So it's not the first option that parents want. I think that there's a misconception, I think, from districts sometimes that parents, just want this specialized private school, and that's not necessarily the case. And most of the time, before parents even come to me, they've worked really hard to collaborate with the school district. They've gone to IEP meeting after IEP meeting to improve the in-district program, to have the district provide the interventions that their child needs. And that's the question. Does the school have the professionals that can implement a program that's appropriate for your child? And if they can't, are they willing to bring in another teacher? Are they willing to implement that program or create that program within the district? Do they have another school within district? It sort of goes in stages, kind of, like the least restrictive environment chart. It's like, first you look for it within the school building. And if they don't have it, do they, are they willing to bring it in? If they're not willing to bring it in, is there another, let's say, elementary school that does have that program? Then you send them to the other elementary school or other school within that district. And then you can even go to other districts. Like if a neighboring district has the program that's appropriate for your child, that's the next step. Sometimes I collaborate with districts and there's a compromise made that the child will try out another district school, an added district school, but it's a public school.
Right.
And there's some added district tuition that has to be paid by the district, but they're more willing to pay that tuition than they are the private school. So it really is the last resort. And by the time we're looking at that, or by the time parents look at that option, they've gone through this litany, or I always encourage parents to do this. Like you must, when they propose a program, like Connie repeated, you go look at it, you go see it. Sometimes you try it, depending on whether your child will, if you feel like it'll be harmful for your child, then you certainly shouldn't send your child to that program. But if it's something that you really don't know whether it'll work or not, sometimes you try it. And if it's not working, then you have a better case or better, ammunition, so to speak, or evidence to show that they need something else. So it's at the point where they're unable to provide those services in the building, in the district, even in a fellow, neighborhood district, and the child's not making any progress.
I would just add to that too, Judy. When you are trying a new program, what would you say? I know I have a certain number in mind, but what would you say, Judy? How long should a parent try that new placement before they throw up their arms and say, this placement's not working either?
I think it really depends. I mean, sometimes when you're talking about behavior, like sometimes extreme behaviors or interfering behaviors, that it's pretty quick that you realize that this is not working. I say you don't give it a long time. If it's social emotional and it's creating, a risk of harm for the child, you get the child out of there quick. In fact, in those circumstances, I don't even know if you should try the program unless your treating professional or your independent professional that you've paid for agrees that this is a program that can help them. But it really depends on the type of disability. It depends on what the gap is between your child and his or her peers, their peers, and whether that's appropriate. There's different ways of measuring progress, like we were talking about. It can be subjective and commensurate with the abilities. So it's really individualized of how long to wait if a program is going to take. Like dyslexia programs, like if a program for addressing dyslexia might take longer than some of these other programs, but like that's probably a harder one. Like SLD, specific learning disabilities, and learning disability, and kids with dyslexia is probably a harder one because it takes a long time. It takes a longer time to see the progress. And even certain behavioral programs also, it takes a while. So I think you have to judge it that way. You have to judge like how long has the child been within the district's program? How much have they regressed? How much they have failed to make progress? Where are they at this point? And sometimes it's you don't try the program because it's been too long that the district has been in charge of this child and has completely failed to address their needs in any way. So
there's a lot to undo and redo, so to speak, to build the kiddo back up so he can be taken into a placement.
And the longer the district fails to provide the appropriate services, usually the more intensive integrated services the child needs at that point. So that usually calls for an out of district.
All right, I'm going to jump into our amazing chat comment section here. We have a ton of questions, great questions. I'm probably just going to be able to ask a selection of them. If I'm not able to get to your question, I have email addresses and you can contact our presenters directly. But I'm going to go through in order. Um, One question, when you had your slide up with the different classifications of disabilities that qualify for an IEP, someone said, is there a list of recommended services recommended for each disability?
I mean, there's none in a statute. This is all based on professional assessment and
Mhm.
what they believe to be appropriate for that disability. I mean, there are some programs out there that are sort of known, like if your child has autism, ABA is a very well-known program that your child, that it's shown, there's evidence that shows that there's progress when that's implemented. Same with Orton Gillingham and Wilson programs. So there are specific programs out there, but there's nothing, at least in the law, there's nothing that says what the appropriate program is.
Right? It sounds cliche, but so many kids, every child is different. And, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to talk over your specific situation. But there are certain folks that write a really great speech evaluation. Maybe that's what you need. Maybe it's a neuropsych. Maybe it's a behavioral evaluation by a doctorate level BCBA. So I think it all depends.
Melissa asks if a school district is non-compliant with the IEP, is due process the only option? Wouldn't that cost the families a lot of money to hire an attorney? Are there other options?
There are other options. Now, obviously, there's making the paper record. That's what I would advise. You make the paper record that they're not complying, if they're not providing the services or the instruction. You notify the case manager. I would even copy the director of special services and specify what is not being provided and see if they address it. If they fail to address it, then I would call a meeting and have the meeting and discuss that at the meeting. If it's and record the meeting. You can record meetings, you just have to tell them ahead of time. So you have the right to record any IEP meeting that you have. You just have to give them notice of that. And usually they also record the meeting as well. You can also bring people with you. Like if you have your home BCBA or if you have your independent evaluator, you can bring that evaluator with you to the meeting. But in this specific case where they're not complying with the IEP, if it's not resolved and you have that information in writing that they have failed to provide it, I would do a records request, by the way. You have the right to your students' records, all of them. So you can file and request those records and they have to provide access to them within 10 days. So I would do that first as well. And I would specifically include in the request, let's say you're saying that the speech therapist has failed to take your child out of class to give services for the past 2 months. Ask for the notes of the speech therapist. Ask for the tally, the calendar tally of the sessions. They're required to keep records of that, and I would request those records if you think that they're not being provided. And then what I would do is these are other options. You can file a request for an investigation with the Department of Education. Um, I don't know recently how it's working. It was sort of hit or miss how effective that was. It can take a long time. Sometimes it was helpful and sometimes it's not. Districts really don't like to be under investigation by the Department of Education. Especially if they're getting a lot of them, and it's the same issue, perhaps. So it's not, they don't think it's fun. So it does bother them and it might motivate them to provide the services. Another way of doing it, because they're notified and then they're under investigation. If you don't want to go to due process, that's okay. You can also file a request for mediation. And that's when you get a mediator from the Department of Education and you try to resolve the issue with a mediator. The mediator's not a judge, but they try to work both sides so there's some compromise or some kind of resolution. If it's an IEP and it's pretty specific about what services or what should be provided, and you have good evidence that it hasn't been provided, that's pretty straightforward. And hopefully that it'll be resolved in your favor with a mediator. other than that, that's basically it. Now, you can file due process on your own. You don't need to hire an attorney. It's very difficult. I don't, and I'm not advising it because I'm an attorney. I just know that it's, from from clients who were in the past had filed pro se, that it is very difficult at times. And it's not like the district attorneys, are lenient on pro se, parents. So I don't advise it. At the very least, if you can get some consults or advice, from either lawyers or parent advocates, I would advise that.
Jennifer asks, can we request an executive function evaluation?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
what kind of an expert would do that? Would that happen within the school or is that an outside person?
Um, I mean, they can do it in the school. There are specific assessments. Usually they're part of the overall educational evaluation and psychological evaluations. I forgot what it's called. Is it the KEPIS? They have all these acronyms and I never remember, but there are like two or three specific evaluations that are specifically tailored to assess executive functioning skills. And it's a very important skill.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of kids struggle with it, and it is something that needs to be addressed and can be addressed, and it's not that expensive. Like the one of the frustrations with districts is sometimes there is like low hanging fruit and they don't grab it, and that's one that it's pretty low hanging because I mean, there are some people that are specially trained in executive functioning skills. Most special education teachers are trained in it. So
If someone from the school is taking notes at the meeting, can you request the notes that they're taking?
that is a tricky one. Okay, so
Will they like it? No.
Can you
you
ask
can
them?
ask. You can definitely ask. The question is, do you have a right to those notes? And that comes under whether it's a student record or not. So you have a right to student records. Whether or not you have a right to the notes that are being taken at the IEP, that it's one of those gray areas, whether it's a student record or not. The districts are fighting back on those types of things, like even notes that some of the related service providers are taking, I'm having trouble getting.
Mm.
Do you have suggestions of resources for families who can't afford private evaluations or attorneys?
So there's the
It's
independent evaluations that you can request the districts to provide. They pay for them and they have a list of reasonably, professionals in the area that their fees are reasonable. And you can go through the list and ask friends and others of who they think is, trustworthy or whatever, or they can be referred, and you can pick one. And you in the district, you basically work with the district in picking that independent evaluator. So that's for evaluations. So you can get the district to pay for independent evaluations.
I will
Um,
say, if there's anything else that you pay for with your child's education, a really good independent evaluation will set the IEP straight for the next few years with goals and objectives. You will learn so much more. If it's at all possible to be able to afford, it's very worthwhile. And now lawyers. Do we know any inexpensive lawyers? I know Rutgers Law
well, there's
has a
Rutgers
clinic,
Law
but
and there's VLJ if you qualify, volunteer lawyers. I do a lot of pro bono work through them. The Volunteer Lawyers for Justice. If you qualify, it's income driven. So you have
and
to
when do you answer those calls, Judy?
it's through them, so they
I
call.
understand. Sure.
Yeah, so that's how that works. I mean, there's parent advocates that can file, help you file due process petitions. That's basically it.
It's hard. And at the Cope Center, we can kind of help and guide you from behind. We can help you write the emails that have the right lingo or language in them. We don't go into IEP meetings at this time. The one thing and I am a 25-year advocate. Some advocates are just charging so much now. Some of them I hear are charging as much as attorneys are, and that's so disheartening. So just be mindful. Again, at the Cope Center, we're all parents. We can certainly, point you in the right direction to a professional that can help you in your situation.
And I always say that if you're going to invest, and you know, we all have pots of money, we have to decide where we're going to invest. I would invest in a really good, like, neuropsych evaluation
Amen. I agree.
before you go to an attorney,
I
before
agree.
anything. Like, you really need to know, and it serves so many purposes. Like Connie said, it will be, you will use it for years to come because it really digs in. Like, if you get a good evaluation, like a neuropsych, which digs into all areas of potential weaknesses, that will serve, that's your Bible,
It
basically.
is. It's
And
20 pages, 25 pages of awesomeness of how your child learns. It's almost like going to a psychic. You read this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's what I was thinking, but I couldn't put it in writing. And
that's your
you,
evidence,
yeah, it's
right?
your evidence. Exactly. And you're no longer dismissed as just the mom. That
Right.
neuropsych can come in and speak for you, explain why she's recommending what she's recommending. So, or he.
Right. And they can come into the, like, they can participate in the meeting as well.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank our wonderful speakers. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get through all questions, but I'm going to provide with contact information so follow-up questions can be
Oh,
definitely answered individually. And I just wanted to review more things going on at the Cope Center coming on, more great talks like this one. Hopefully, Judy will have you back this spring and do another talk. We really
Glad to.
enjoyed working with you today. So we have at the Cope Center a lot of programs, upcoming events going on. Connie's does a monthly 30-minute IEP meeting. It's free. Drop in for 30 minutes, get a quick review and jolt of insight and wisdom. We have an awesome downstairs space with after school program for tweens and teens, yoga, coding, art, Lego robotics. It is super cool, super fun. Your child will want to be social. Um, our parent education team at the Cope Center wears a lot of hats. We provide answers to many autism-related questions through programs like this webinar, free workshops, and integration with our medical team. Our consultants can provide one-on-one support to families who require more hands-on help with school matters, resource connections, the whole transition problem process, and even college. So give us a call if you want to make an appointment. And if you wish to support more public programs like this one, free, open, informative information, please consider a donation to the Cope Center. We're a nonprofit, and donation information is available on our website. This concludes our winter webinar schedule. Great anchor to a great 5 webinar series. You can see this presentation plus our other ones on our YouTube channel and our website, and we will be announcing our spring schedule soon. I want to thank you, Judy, for joining us today. You were awesome, smart,
Oh,
and informative as always. If for folks who want to talk with Judy directly, her email is judith at parlesrekem.com and can be found at the ParlesRekem Law Firm. Connie is available with us at the Cope Center for Autism. And thank you. Thank you
thank
to our
you, Laura.
speakers. Thank you to our audience. Great evening. I hope we can do it again this spring.
thank you
Great.
so much.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
night,
Laura.
everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you soon.